Welcome to Stuck, Time to Improv. I'm Mary Scott with Business Riff, and today my guest is Esther Deutsch from RCS Professional Services. And we're going to talk about cybersecurity for startups. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you so much, Mary. So great to be here. I appreciate you having me, and I'm super excited about this. Great topic.
It is a great topic. And a lot of startups end up with things like intellectual property they need protected. But let's talk a little bit more about what kinds of things they need to have in the back end to make sure that they're secure.
Sure. Well, first off, I'll say that I was recently reading that about 80% of businesses experience at least one threat per month. And this could be a threat that they may not even know about. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher than even reported, because of course, what's not reported, we don't even know about. But the point being that it's out there, there's a lot of threats. And, whereas previously they may have been only hitting larger corporations or bigger businesses at this point in time, in today's day and age, and with the changes in COVID, which I'm sure we'll talk about, they're hitting all sizes. So startups included in that category. So that's another thing I want to sort of dispel a myth. Often we hear, because we work, specifically with small businesses and startups as well. And we often hear, I don't have the money for that or the budget. And I think that a lot of business owners, sometimes, especially when they're starting out, don't necessarily realize that you don't need necessarily to have a big budget or any budget sometimes to do certain things. And that's sort of what I want to touch on to stay safe.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, we always see when you've got your desktop open, things like Norton and things like AVG. And is that something people should be paying attention to, or is there something better, or what kind of questions should they ask?
Absolutely. I mean, antivirus, I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, is definitely one piece of the puzzle. The other thing I always default to is mentioning MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, which is basically adds another level of security to your existing environment. And more often than not, it's an add-on to a subscription that you already have and or a minimal cost. And for the cost or no cost, it adds a great level of security. So it could sometimes be annoying, I can tell you, from the IT side and also from the user side. It's definitely another step, but it's worth it. It is worth it. On the upside, it definitely helps with password management, which is another area of risk potentially. People still use bad passwords and or don't change them enough, even if they're good passwords. And the bad guys are all over those. And MFA single sign-on, password manager, these are things that could really help you not only make your life easier, because then you don't need to log in with remember all your passwords, which I definitely can't do anymore. You also have safety. So you get 2 in 1.
Okay, that sounds good, especially if a startup's going to have a client portal where they want to be able to manage and make sure that their client data is secure. But even from their own perspective, they want to make sure that their own data is protected, and 2-factor authentication can help with that, right? Yeah. So are there particular pieces of software that should be part of anybody's toolkit?
Absolutely. So we implement a lot of the security functionality that's in the Office 365 environment. And there's some other ones as well. You don't have to be in a Microsoft environment to leverage different security tools.
Okay. So what kind of security tools? Are there names we should recognize or be aware of?
Well, for password management, there's something called LastPass.
Okay.
But that's just one. There's a million different security tools. I wouldn't necessarily say one over another, and I don't want to say that one's better than another. I would say you want to look at pricing, of course, but obviously with pricing, sometimes you can compromise on security. That being said, just because something's more expensive doesn't mean it does more. And that's part of actually what we do for our clients is we've built a security suite. Some of the companies that are involved is like Arctic Wolf is one. Trying to think off the top of my head of some of the other ones. SentinelOne is a security program. And I mean, they all do different things. And that's part of it, is really getting down to Barracuda is another, is understanding what they each do. And in some of them there's overlap, and some of them there's overlap with what Microsoft offers, and knowing the ins and outs of exactly which part of your system they're protecting, whether it's email protection or server protection or employee education, which is another component that doesn't even necessarily cost money, building a culture of security, which we could talk more about, but all these different tools, just knowing what they each do and really understanding it, which I don't even fully understand, but my team does. And that helps make sure that you're not paying for things that you don't actually need.
So it pays to hire a security company to help you figure out what's going to be best for your particular business. I'm thinking some of the biotech firms need to be HIPAA compliant, and some of the insurance or legal firms need to be compliant in other ways with their own organizations. What questions would a startup ask a potential security company to know that they're going to be the right ones for them?
I would like to mention most security partners, at least the ones that we work with, for exactly this reason, they offer a free cybersecurity assessment or risk assessment in which they'll basically show you what areas of the business they're looking at and whether or not they identify risk. I always say you want to know what you don't know, even if you don't do anything. It's still good to have that insight. And so the report should help, especially somebody without background, understand what areas of the business may be at risk and sort of lead that conversation of what to ask them.
Are there licenses or certifications for cybersecurity organizations that you can tell somebody's good?
That's a great question. There are many, and there's also certain compliances that they would meet in order to make sure that their clientele are HIPAA compliant. They also need to be things like that. From what I understand, those certifications are not easy to get. And as an example, we practice what we preach. We don't do these things internally. A lot of the more intensive compliance, we have our own partner that we work with who audits us and make sure that we're also in line. So the same things that we tell our clients to do, we do on our own company, and we recommend that everybody does the same.
Okay, and talk a little bit about online security.
We do run a bunch of webinars, and one we did was just on how to recognize like a hyperlink and know what to click on and what not to. And I'm sure it's in there. I probably didn't listen well enough to repeat it, but that's the one I'd recommend. It's on our YouTube channel for that. But there is a lot as far as education, and that's some of the things that I learned. Obviously, I didn't listen well enough, but there were a lot of things I learned as far as knowing if a certain link is good to visit, or if it's a safe link. And a lot of the scams that we're seeing are happening just because a user, even if the CEO is aware or the founder, a user that they may not even have been aware of, either a user leaves and is frustrated with the company and takes data out of the company with them, or they just click on something without realizing. I mean, the amount of times that I've come close to clicking on something, and I have background, like I could only imagine, the regular user who doesn't necessarily know what to look out for might click on something. So there's a lot with regard to like antivirus protection, anti-malware, of course, making sure you're backed up and patching and doing patching updates on a regular basis that help you stay away from getting.
So how often should people change their passwords?
Well, with using single sign-on or MFA, you actually don't need to as much, from what I understand. So I think I'm saying that correctly. So because you end up not using a password, basically. And again, we have another webinar that actually demonstrates how to use single sign-on and how it works. So if you're interested in actually going into depth, I could share that. But you actually don't even need to worry about that, which is one of the beautiful things about it. But if you're not going to use that, I mean, every month, I would say, every few months, you don't want to go a few years and you're like with the same password, because probably you won't have your infrastructure anymore in the same place.
Right. So two method authentication, and change your passwords, and hire a good security expert to do a free assessment.
Yes.
So that you know what you don't know. Well, thank you very much, Esther Deutsch from RCS Professional Services. We've gotten a hint of what you need to do about cybersecurity, and I'm sure we can put some links to some of those webinars she mentioned in the comment section. Thank you for coming to Stuck, Time to Improv. I'm Mary Scott with Business Riff. I provide startups with validating their ideas, avoiding common mistakes, and custom resources to get to where they need to go faster. So thanks again. And this is Stuck, Time to Improv.